What's up, people? It's Mr. Bosh, and I'm back. We're going to go over the types of exercises that you're going to face today in the second part of the Unit 3 exam prep, which is coming tomorrow. Yeah! But I know you guys have been studying, you've been practicing, you're ready! So, for the other half, it was actually like the first half of the entire unit where we dealt with transversals creating angles as they intersect parallel lines. Remember, a transversal is any line that intersects two or more others in a plane. And if the lines that a transversal intersects are parallel to one another, then the angles that are created are all related, right? So let's look at this figure we have here. We have lines M and N, and they are parallel. That's what these symbols mean. The little arrow symbols on the lines indicate that they are parallel lines. They do not intersect on this plane. And W is the transversal. So the transversal, W, intersecting N and then M, creates four angles here when it intersects N, and four angles here as it intersects M. And these four angles here are identical to these four angles here. And that's the corresponding angles postulate, which is, it's like a theorem. It's facts. It's geometry facts that are noticeably true. It doesn't have to be proven. If these two lines are parallel, this angle here, which is in the same position as this angle here, known as corresponding angles, they are the same measure. And from previous units, you know that these two angles next to each other, these adjacent angles here, are a linear pair and add to 180 degrees, which means supplementary. Supplementary is the vocabulary phrase attached to two angles that add up to 180 degrees. And then every pair of angles that are opposite each other are known as vertical angles, and vertical angles are congruent. But furthermore, since corresponding angles are congruent, that makes every single pair of angles that you can identify here, no matter where they are either the same measure or they are supplementary. That's what really you need to walk away being comfortable with. Looking at pairs of angles in this situation and being able to tell if they are supplementary or congruent. All right, so corresponding angles are congruent, but then vertical angles are congruent, which by the transitive property that made alternate interior angles congruent. By the same property of algebra, the transitive property, we can prove that alternate exterior angles are congruent. Same side or consecutive interior angles are supplementary. Same side exterior angles are supplementary. Any two angles you pick from these 8 are either the same measure, congruent, or supplementary. They add to 180 degrees. So the exercise can be as complicated as this, which this is the highest level of being complicated that you'll face in these exercises, or it can be very simple where they just give you a missing angle, like an angle measure in degrees, in numbers, and you fill out the rest. You just have to recognize angle pairs to be congruent or supplementary. So in this particular exercise, let's get to it. You'll be asked to solve for x and for y, and you might even be asked to find the measure of the angle. So we're going to do all of that. Looking at this figure, which is two parallel lines intersected by a transversal, we have some angles that are labeled with algebraic expressions. We can use the relationships that the angles have in order to solve the variables. So looking at what we have 9x plus 2 in this angle, and that corresponds to this angle, which is labeled 2y plus 20. But even though we know these two are the same measure, because there's two variables, I'm not going to be able to figure out the exact solution to any one of the variables just yet. And then looking at this angle we have here, 5x minus 18, that has x in it like this one up here. So let's identify the relationship that these two angles have. Now here is something that probably a lot of geometry teachers are going to be like, no, because you're never supposed to assume angle measure. But in a picture like this, there's usually an obvious obtuse angle and an obvious acute angle. So if you're comparing any two angles in this figure, if they're both obtuse or both acute, it's pretty safe to assume that they are congruent. But if one that you're looking at is obtuse and the other is acute, it's pretty safe to say that this is an angle pair that is supplementary, adding to 180 degrees. But let's just prove it. That's what it is. In this case, the angles labeled with X are supplementary, but let's see why. The one that's labeled 5x minus 18, that corresponds to this one here, which we don't know, but it forms a linear pair with this one over here that's labeled 9x plus 2. So this angle and this angle are supplementary. And that's how we're going to set this up to solve it. 9x plus 2 plus 5x minus 18 is equal to 180. That's the setup. Because those two angles are supplementary, they add up to 180 degrees. And now you can use your rules of algebra to solve for x. So first, simplify by combining like terms. The 9x and the 5x and the 2 minus 18. This would be 14x minus 16 is equal to 180. We're going to use the inverse property to get rid of the minus 16. We're going to add 16 to the left to cancel it, and then add 16 to the right to balance the equation. 14x is equal to 196. All right. Divide the left side by 14 to cancel out the 14, multiplying the x, and do the same thing to the right. And we're going to get x is equal to 14. So now I know that x is equal to 14. So from here, we can determine the measures of these angles, which is actually what we're going to have to do in order to figure out y. Or if that was the only thing the exercise was asking, then you could just move on from here. But we're going to have to figure out what y is also, so let's go ahead and substitute our value in for x, 14, and find out this angle measure. So I'm going to do 9 times 14 plus 2 to figure out that angle up there. This is 126 plus 2, which is 128. So this angle measures 128 degrees. And since these are supplementary, we could subtract this from 180, which is 52 degrees, just in case they ask you to figure out the angle measure. These correspond, so they're congruent. That would also be 52 degrees. But now for the part where we figure out what y is, 2y plus 20 is equal to, we figured it out, 128. This angle corresponds to this angle here over the parallel lines, and therefore they're congruent. So 2y plus 20 is equal to 128 degrees. Inverse property to cancel out the 20. And then inverse property again to cancel out the 2. Property of equality to balance the equation. We get y is equal to 54. So if they asked you to find x and y, x is equal to 14 and y is equal to 54. If they ask you to determine the measure of any of the angles, you can, we know that because we plugged in the value that we got for x and figured that out. So however this exercise varies, you should be able to navigate and get the correct answer. If not, let me know. Let's work together. Let me explain what's happening. Let me look at your work and see where where you might be going wrong. I'm here. And if I'm not here because you're doing this at home or something, send me an email or just wait until we meet again. Anyway, that's all. Good luck. Have fun, work hard, and be good to the people around you.